Over the past 7 days, I've been taking on a $100 crypto trading challenge to see what I could turn it into. I'm not a professional trader, I'm a complete beginner, so I took an amount that I was completely comfortable with losing. To keep things simple and avoid blowing my account, I set a few ground rules that I have to keep. The first one is that I can only make 1 to 2 trades per day, so I don't make any emotional decisions. And number 2 is that I can only trade Bitcoin, because that's what I mainly know. Here's how things turned out, so let's get into it. Alright, so on day 1, even though the markets were looking a bit bullish in the short term, I saw a nice opportunity for a short position. On the 4-hour chart after the pump, there was a gap. This is something called a fair value gap, and price normally comes back to these areas before moving up again. At the same time, the RSI was over 70, which means that things are normally getting into the overbought zone, which means the RSI is likely gonna cool off. We are also getting close to some short-term resistance at around 88k. This lined up with some Fibonacci retracement levels, the 200 EMA, and some other things that I've been watching. So with all that, I decided to jump into a short position. It's important to have a stop loss and a take profit, so I decided to put my stop loss in the resistance zones, and I put my take profit around the fair value gap, around in the middle. This trade started going good, so I decided to move my stop loss into the break even, and then later when it came into profit, I moved my stop loss in, so if the price were to pump again, I would still make money. This was a decent trade and I ended up making $7 from it. Alright, so on day 2, I took a trade that was pretty similar to the one I took on day 1 with a similar setup. Bitcoin had a short rally and was up over 4% that day. And even though I'm very bullish on Bitcoin over the next coming weeks, I am in the short term right now more bearish, and I think that we're gonna get a pullback. I was on the 4-hour time frame again, and this time again we had a fair value gap. I figured that we were gonna come back to fill this gap like we did last time. I also mapped out a short-term uptrend with higher highs and higher lows. It wasn't super obvious, but I still marked it out to keep it in mind. On the daily chart, we were approaching the 92k level, which has been previous strong support. Now that we were coming back to this level, but below it, I figured that this support would now turn into resistance. What also caught my eye was that this was lining up with the neckline of a W pattern that had been forming. This was not a good trade in the end. Bitcoin had a huge pump after this. It kept pumping and it hit my stop loss, so I ended up losing $13.5 on this trade. On day 3, Bitcoin and in general the whole crypto market has just been going super strong. It was a full-on rally, and I am very bullish on Bitcoin in the longer term. So these short-term trades were starting to get a little bit tricky. You know, I've been waiting for that pullback, but the market has just not been slowing down really. Still, I stuck to my plan and what I have been seeing on the charts, and decided that I wanted to see if I can still catch that pullback in the short term. The reasons for the trade was pretty similar to day 1 and 2. The RSI was even more overheated now. We were getting closer to some major resistance zones, so I won't go too deep into all of these things again. This time though, the trade actually worked out. I got into the trade, I caught a small move back, and I ended up making a $12 profit from this trade. On day 4, my account was sitting at $105, so this means that I have made a total of $5 in profit. Not exactly thrilling, but we're still in the game. And honestly, I know a lot of people online make videos like this where they show how to turn $100 into $10,000, but let's just be realistic, that is just not how it goes. Most of the time, if you force it, you end up losing money. Anyways, I was still trading Bitcoin, and if you hadn't already guessed it, I was looking for a short position again. On the daily chart, it was starting to look like we were finally gonna get a bigger pullback. There was a big fair value gap. The RSI was going into the overbought zone here on the daily as well, and we were getting close to some major resistance. I was also keeping an eye on the MACD indicator. It was still in the green, so technically bullish, but the momentum had started to slow down, and that worked in my favor since I was shorting. If the MACD crossed below the natural line, that would actually be a decent signals of a reversal coming. One more thing I noticed on the 8-hour time frame was a bearish divergence forming. It hadn't really been confirmed yet. Normally it confirms when you get a few candle closes, so I was still waiting for that, but for now I was just keeping an eye on it. Also, we were heading into the weekend where the markets don't really have a lot of momentum. If anything, they tend to slow down a little bit more. So I figured a cool off was more likely than a further pump. I also decided that I was not going to trade over the weekend because again, there's not a lot of momentum unless something stood out to me. Day 5 kicked off with a new week. Like I said, I wasn't going to take any trades on the weekend again since there's no really momentum happening there. I was still having my short position open, and at that time it was currently in $10 profit. It actually got really close to hitting my take profit, which was around 92,000. But right before we hit it, we saw a bounce to the upside. I decided that I was just gonna keep this position open because the signals that I had been looking at was starting to confirm. So my plan wasn't really changing. On the 8-hour time frame, the bearish divergence that I was talking about was finally starting to confirm and play out. The RSI had just set a lower high and it was overall still in the overbought territory. So short term I was still bearish. With a setup like this, we should expect a pullback or at least some sideways price action so these things can cool off before going higher. Zooming out on the daily chart, the bigger picture was still looking bullish, but I was expecting the price to come down and fill the fair value gap around 90 to 91,000. Once we hit these levels, my plan was to turn bullish and take long positions because I was expecting a strong bounce around these levels. Plus by then the MACD and RSI and these things would have cooled off, meaning that I was better set up to take a long position. So for now I stayed short, I kept the same price tag and let the trade play out. The plan was to ride the move down, and once we hit support, then we start to long Bitcoin. Alright, so day 6 came a bit later than I had expected, but that was just because the markets was super slow and nothing was really happening, and I didn't want this video to get too boring. Nothing exciting was really happening, it was just a lot of sideways price action. I actually came really close to hitting my take profit again, but like the last time, right before it hit it, it saw a bounce. Honestly, I was not really expecting to make money from this trade. I just wanted the markets to do something so I could stay active trading, but the markets was just doing absolutely nothing besides a lot of sideways price action. At one point, the price even got close to hitting my stop loss. On the 8-hour time frame, the bearish divergence we have been talking about did play out, but it didn't play out with a pullback, it just played out with more of a sideways price action. Same thing with the MACD, momentum had been slowing down, but not enough to roll lower and started turning bearish. RSI had cooled down but was still sitting very high. On the 4-hour time frame, the price had been stuck between two levels, bouncing back and forth with no real momentum to either way. And on the 6-hour time frame, a ascending triangle was starting to form, which is normally a bullish pattern. So at this point I figured out the short position that I had taken was likely gonna get stopped out sooner or later. I was really hoping for a deeper pullback, but it turned out the week was just more of a consolidation where the RSI and these other things could cool off before going higher. Short term, it could honestly break either way, but at this point I was actually starting to turn more bullish than bearish. We were right around some key resistance, so I decided I was just gonna let the trade play out. So on day 7, which was the last day, the trade I let play out ended up getting liquidated. And at that point I was really frustrated that it was not going my way. So I made the classic mistake and jumped right into another short position. I let my emotions take over me and jumped right into another short position with even more leverage, which is definitely not how you should do it. But this time it actually worked out, and I ended up with a balance of $124, which means I made a profit of $24 overall. Not amazing, but still a win that I will take any day. I really wanted this video to feel realistic and what you can expect if you decide to start out trading. You know, instead of these videos where they show how to turn $100 into $10,000, because that's just too good to be true. Here's a screenshot of all the trades I made. I definitely think I had some decent setups, but at the end I let the emotions take a bit over me. I have done some longer term trading before, but this was my first time day trading. And yeah, I don't think this is for me really. The stress just messes with my head and I end up making stupid decisions that feel more like gambling than trading. So moving forward, I'm probably gonna stick to DCAing and some longer term trading. Unless, of course, if you guys want to see me try this again with a bigger balance, more structure, a longer period, then we can definitely make that happen. So that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.